Well, International Women's Day is Sunday, and we've been looking at how women can feel more confident stepping into the investing world and why some of the traits that make women hesitant may actually make them better investors. Joining us now is Kelsey Dunwoodie, portfolio manager at Dean Knight Capital Management. Kelsey, thank you very much for joining us today.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Let's talk about some of the traits that some people may look at being a weakness, but you say no, these can actually be a strength for women.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, as Brianne and I would know, every woman is different, but the stereotype is that we're cautious and risk averse. And I think, traditionally with investing, it's about taking on risks. So women aren't naturally seeing themselves from a young age as being, people who possess the traits of an investor.
And Brianne, I know you want to join this conversation.
Yeah, Kelsey, so glad to have you and welcome. Happy International Women's Day. I think we are seeing, as you know, this massive wealth transfer happening globally, especially over the next decade, with really women expected to control a growing share of assets. I think the stats are, over the next decade, nearly 70% of the 124 trillion global wealth transfer is expected to go to women or to females. So, how do you think that will change the way capital is invested or, the shift to female investors?
Yeah, I'm not in the business of predictions. I really try to avoid that. But I think what, we're going to see happen, and, a credit to people like yourselves, Brianne, is, we are moving towards a world of stewardship and really having a personal investment philosophy. And some people do that on their own, but a lot of people work with advisors like yourself or my firm here, Dean's Knight. And women are really good at working with a team. And they don't walk into a situation thinking that they know everything. So, it lends itself to working with professionals. And I think that we are at a time where the advisory business is outpacing the sort of stock brokerage business. And not sure what it was like for you growing up, but for me initially, I would have never thought that I would be sitting in this room doing this, because what we saw on the media was the stockbroker trader making big bets. It's a world that seemed just not really accessible or appealing. But when we reframe the conversation to be, what you're doing here as a woman for yourself, for your family, for your, charities that you want to support, is really stewarding the capital, then I think the conversation is a lot more accessible for women.
Yeah, and we all often see that, even in our own practice as well, as you mentioned, women who stay invested or stay more disciplined and don't react, through these cycles, they do end up outperforming. And there are some stats on, female investors versus male investors. How do you see this and attracting more female investors or females to start to investing?
Yeah, we work in this every day, so it's sort of like the fish who swims in the ocean doesn't realize what water is. But, people who aren't investing every day, they might not realize that all of the decisions you make, it's the time in the market that's the most important. So if you can start, and not to make any women feel like it's too late, but if you can start following an investment discipline sooner in your independent career, then you have a better outcome over the long term. And that's just because, when we stay invested in the market, yes, our investments will go down. We always have market events and corrections, but they will go up. Every correction over time has had a recovery. So you don't want to be sitting on the sidelines. And what the studies show, and what I've seen in my practice, and let's be clear, still the majority of the clients are men. Every time we bring on a woman, we're excited. And increasingly, spouses or significant, females, whether it's daughters or CFOs, are coming into the conversation. But, women tend to not panic in the corrections. And that's really where the differences are made. So instead of just selling on fear, they pick up the phone, they call an advisor, they call a trusted friend, and they're reminded, hey, Brianne, you didn't make this plan for, the next 2 weeks. You made it for 5 or 10 years, and your assets are allocated in a reasonable manner. And this is not going to undo everything that you have accomplished up to this point. So trust the process, trust the plan.
I just want to jump in. You mentioned about younger women. We're seeing more and more young investors coming in. Are we seeing more young women come in to invest as well and do it on their own and with more confidence?
I don't actually have the data in front of me for that, but I do believe that that is what's proving out. And, the lower cost trading platforms and companies that are helping investors get online and set up are definitely attracting youth overall, not just women. Of course, my caution would always be is if you're doing it on your own, again, when you're young, mistakes can be made up, but you want to make sure that you're learning from those mistakes. And it's not just, hey, I picked the wrong business here, it didn't work out. It's also, what were my emotions around that? How did I react when I got bad news? Because the psychology of who you are as an investor is going to be something that really dictates how you proceed as you continue to get more and more wealth to invest over your lifetime.
All right, Brianne, we have about 1 more minute. Last question to you.
Yeah, I think this would be great for women watching or for women who may feel more intimidated by the markets or think they need some large amount of money to start investing. And as you mentioned earlier, there's never a late time to start, just get started. Really, what's the one thing you wish more people understood about getting started?
For me, I think getting started is just take whatever you have and go to any trusted Canadian institution and get an index fund if you're afraid, right? We know how the indexes perform over time. Start participating and getting a little bit going. And as you grow as an investor, you might decide to make decisions on your own. But one thing I'll just say before we wrap up is it's actually the not making decisions or just being patient that pays off over time. So, all of us admire Warren Buffett, and some of the things, not following the crowd, being patient, ignoring the noise, all those traits that make him a great investor are very common traits in female investors. So, if hopefully, there's a lot of future Warren Buffetts out there if they just go and start today.
All right, Kelsey, we have to wrap it up there, but thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you so much. Happy International Women's Day.
Kelsey Dunwoodie is the COO and Portfolio Manager at Dean's Knight Capital Management.